Well, it took only 2 days of online outrage and calls for the boycotting of not just Doritos, but also for Frito-Lay and PepsiCo, for Doritos to decide to part ways with self admitting, child molesting, transgender influencer Samantha Hudson, who Doritos had recently hired to be their brand ambassador to Spain. Apparently, the immediate online outrage towards what I'm sure that some woke marketing idiot at Doritos thought was a brilliant merchandising strategy reached the ears of someone in the higher ups of Frito-Lay or PepsiCo, whereby they quickly realized that a Bud Light type hole was being dug in the ground for them and immediately had this person fired. So, because of how unlike with Bud Light, this company's response to fire this person was so quick, many would probably take the win and think that we've won this fight. But is that the case? After all, from what I've seen happening over the past few years and how companies are increasingly promoting the woke agenda in their marketing, specifically focused on young children, I tend to believe that there is something nefarious hidden behind the scenes that we're not quite done with just yet. Think about this. Have you noticed how some companies have recently been hiring people who have absolutely no connection with their product, but have online influence over kids as their brand ambassadors? These people who represent and promote the very image of that which the woke liberal left is pushing in our public schools through the introducing of graphic sexuality to children. Why? Why would any company or organization that has built its success upon the usage of smart marketing strategies purposely turn away from that and promote a strategy that specifically goes against its primary consumer base? It simply does not make any sense. After all, the purpose of marketing is to increase sales, not destroy it, as we've seen happen with Bud Light and Target. So, as that is the case, the only rational explanation for it is that there must be a hidden agenda being played out behind the scenes that is leading companies in this direction. And what is that possible thing happening in the dark? Well, I personally believe that it is the effort of sick, depraved perverts, including very rich and powerful people who want to see pedophilia become legal. When you see what's happening in our society today, you notice that we have pastors, priests, politicians, teachers, coaches, even family members who are consistently exposed as being depraved predators and abusers of children. Notwithstanding, of course, those rich and powerful names on the Epstein list that those in power will never allow us to see. And why not? After all, doesn't our government and legal system believe that pedophilia is a heinous crime and that those who harm innocent children in that way should be punished? What keeps that list from being made public unless it is because releasing it would hinder the progress of the agenda to sexualize young children? We'll go into that in more detail in a minute. Now, I've seen articles written by professors and LGBTQ activists that advocate for the sexualization of young children because they have disgusting predatory lust for them that they want satisfied. You may not be aware of this, but there is currently a movement happening globally that is steadily progressing the attempt to legalize the sexual abuse of children. And what is most interesting about this is that it's a movement that isn't being done in secret. It's happening right out in the open, yet so few seem to be aware of it. These deplorable perverts and molesters are steadily gaining ground in their attempts to legalize the abuse of children. And if we will not recognize how our inaction will result in many innocent children being harmed, then we will have no one else to blame when this depravity finds its way into our own homes and harms our own children. In this video, I will provide just a few examples of how this movement is openly progressing, which hopefully will cause people to become aware of this and hence commit themselves to be a part of the fight to stop it. Now, I have heard it said that child sex trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world. And I have no problem believing that through the things I see happening today by how many within the LGBTQ and our own liberal democratic political leadership continually fights to keep sexually graphic, LGBTQ explicitly themed, inappropriate, pornographic materials in the public school system. One must ask why this is. Why is the sexual indoctrination of young children so significant to these groups? Well, as we will see, it is because this movement is aimed at legalizing a young child's ability to agree to sexual relations with these adult perverts. You see, as they are currently attempting to change the law so that young children will be legally allowed to engage in sexual activity with these molesters, they are simultaneously prepping the minds of the children to believe that being involved sexually with these adult perverts is a good thing. Hence, once they get the law changed, all the seeds that these pedophiles have planted in the minds of our young children would be grown and ready for their disgusting harvest. Hopefully, you can see why these predators fight so hard to continue the sexual indoctrination of our young children. So, let's begin our examples with an excerpt from a 2019 New Yorker interview of a person that is very well known, famed attorney, author, and law professor Alan Dershowitz. It says this: in a 1997 op ed in the Los Angeles Times, he argued against statutory rape laws, writing, quote, "There must be criminal sanctions against sex with very young children, but it is doubtful whether such sanctions should apply to teenagers about the age of puberty," which, by the way, is normally between the ages of 8 and 13, since voluntary sex is so common in their age group. He suggested that 15 was a reasonable age of consent, no matter how old the partner was. Now, you can see how that statement was made to sound like it was about the child being able to make their own decision concerning their own sexual activity, as they were already being sexual. However, then what is slipped in are the words, "no matter how old the partner was." This is the real agenda for the push in sexualizing young children. It's not about what the kids are doing sexually. It's all about how these older perverts want to engage with kids. It goes on to say, in 2014, Virginia Roberts Guilfrey, one of Epstein's victims, stated in a court filing that Epstein lent her out for sex to his friends, Dershowitz among them. Dershowitz has strenuously denied the allegations and maintained that Guilfrey is a near pathological liar engineering an extortion plot. Guilfrey's claims about him have never been directly tested in court. Instead, they have been featured as side arguments in civil suits brought by others. Now, isn't it interesting how her claim hasn't been directly tested in court? Isn't it interesting how the Epstein list that supposedly holds the names of all the rich and powerful people who allegedly were clients of his is protected from being released to the public? Isn't it interesting how Ghislaine Maxwell, the person who knows the names on that list, but will not talk about it, is in a luxury-style prison with sports programs, yoga, and a bunch of other activities instead of serving time for her atrocities in a regular women's prison? It seems quite evident that powerful people are at work protecting these alleged clients. Once again, if our government and legal system is in agreement that pedophilia is a crime, one would have to ask why the people on this list are being protected. Now, after his interview was released, Dershowitz received a lot of backlash for his stance on seemingly supporting the legalization of pedophilia. He responded in a tweet in which he said, "I stand by the constitutional, not moral argument I offered in my controversial op-ed. If a 16-year-old has the constitutional right to have an abortion without state or parental interference, how could she not have the constitutional right to engage in consensual sex?" Now, I can see the point of how making it a constitutional issue is applicable. Because if by constitutional right, the 15, 16-year-old is legally permitted to engage in sexual activity with anyone, then all the pedos out there are safe because the child has the right to engage sexually with them. My friends, this is their game. This is how they are manipulating the culture to get the law changed so kids can legally be molested by them. Now, let's go deeper. In a Bill of Health article from Harvard Law dated 5/2023, written by Catherine Drabiek, it says this: recently, the International Commission of Jurists published a report advocating for significant revisions to criminal law, such as decriminalizing prostitution, intentional transmission of HIV, and purchasing and possessing drugs for personal use. Most notably, The report also calls to re examine laws relating to consensual sexual conduct involving children under the age of majority and people with disabilities who ordinarily cannot consent. As if it's not heinous enough that this International Commission of Jurists are advocating for perverted adults to be able to molest children, they are even attempting to include the abusing of children with disabilities who do not have the mental capacity to knowingly consent. Clearly, this demonstrates how this movement to sexualize children is all about these depraved monsters and their desire to fulfill their despicable lusts, regardless of how abusive it is to the children. In reference to the same announcement by the International Commission of Jurists, a Fox News article dated 5/2023, written by Carrie Burns, says this: it does not actively call for decriminalizing sex between adult and minors, but it states that children have both the capacity and the legal right to make sexual decisions. So again, you can see how the pathway that these pedos are using to be legally able to molest children is paved by their attempting to present this as they're advocating for a child's right. It goes on to say, according to the United Nations, children may consent to sex with adults. This has been the plan all along, social media influencer Ian Miles Chung tweeted over the weekend to his 538,000 followers. And this is what I have been saying. There is a definitive plan to legalize pedos molesting children. The article continues to say concerning the jurist's opinion that no minimum age of sexual consent is suggested in the report. So once again, you should be able to see that the issue is rooted in these depraved monsters wanting to molest children of any age. The once unthinkable recommendations from an international cabal of global elite legal minds appears to suggest that pedophilia could be normalized. Evidently, what I believe is happening behind the scenes in a hidden agenda that is leading companies to hire those who target our children isn't a conspiracy theory after all. There is actually a global attempt of depraved pedos moving ever closer towards getting the legal right to molest young children. As a final example, we turn to an article from Planet Today dated 11/19/2023 concerning the World Economic Forum. And if by this time you haven't been shaken to the core as to what is openly happening in our society in the attempt to harm our children, then this should do it for you. The World Economic Forum has ordered governments around the world to reduce the age of consent to 12 years and decriminalize pedophilia. According to the sick and twisted minds in the corridors of power in Davos, age of consent laws have no place in an enlightened society because they discriminate against a child's right to choose to have sex with adults. So you see, once again, it's all about legalizing the sexual abuse of children by these depraved adults. The article goes on to say, the German government is considering proposals to legalize child porn and drastically lower the age of consent as part of radical new plans pushed by the WEF to make the world more inclusive towards pedophiles. I guess the message of inclusivity should include depraved pedophiles too, right? The German Bundestag has accepted a petition outlining children's rights, once again making it about children's rights, which was drafted by a notorious pro-pedophilia organization, Crum 13, a pro-pedophilia group which advocates for child rape and the legalization of pedophilia. Now, all of this sounded outrageous to me at first because I would have thought that there couldn't be an organization like that which could influence any government. So I looked it up on Wikipedia and found this. Crum 13, or K13 for short, was a pedophile group in Germany which was founded in Trier in 1993 by Dieter Geisking, who has since been convicted several times. The group advocated the legalization of the production, possession, and distribution of child pornography, which is punishable not only in Germany, as well as the decriminalization of sexual contact between adults and children. So, as I stated earlier, this perverse movement to legalize the molestation of young children is steadily moving forward, and it's not just here. It's happening everywhere. These companies who think that they are promoting social justice to meet their ESG and DEI quotas, in many cases are just pawns in a bigger game. We know that companies have to bow to the BlackRock and Soros gods who control the ESG and DEI standards by which banks qualify them for loans. But why must they use these extreme people as brand ambassadors? If, in fact, as BlackRock and Soros claim, it's just about inclusion, why then do they avoid those like Caitlyn Jenner, a trans person who doesn't advocate for child abuse or sexualization in any form? Well, I think the answer to that is easy to see in that a person like that doesn't further the agenda to legalize the right to molest children. The response of Doritos to fire this self admitting child abuser is in no way something that should cause us to think that we're making a big dent in the problem. Because in reality, I don't think that these sick, rich, and powerful predators really care about the firing of the Doritos brand ambassador. Because as long as they know that this is where we think the fight is, then they are free to continue to push forward in the place where the real fight is happening, in the realm of the law. My point to make is that although it is a great thing that Doritos has responded so quickly and fired this person, the fact remains that this fight for our children is far from over. In fact, we are yet neck deep in it, perhaps even losing it by how it is progressing in the world's courts and governments. 20 years ago, no court or government would have even entertained the idea of adults fighting for the right to molest children. Yet today, here we are, living in a society wherein liberal, democratic politicians, governments, and courts are not only entertaining the idea, but advocating for it. Can you notice the reoccurring party name associated with this movement? All over the world, it is the liberal Democrats of the state that is always the party advocating for this depravity. My fear for the safety and protection of our children from these predators is that people have short memories. Because of that, very little ever really gets done about this problem. When the movie The Sound of Freedom came out, not long ago, the child sex trade was all people could talk about. People were greatly affected by how children are being abused. Yet now, just 4 months later, when was the last time anyone even thought about it? These depraved perverts are moving closer to their goal of being completely free to abuse our children. And now is the time for us to be aware and to fight back. We need to accept that there are powerful people out there that have perverted desires for our young and who are never going to stop going after them unless we stop them. We can start fighting back by bringing the awareness of what is happening to everyone we know. And look, I know that this problem is greater than any one of us, and most of us feel powerless to do anything about it. But I do believe that the more we expose this, the more power we will take from them. And maybe, just maybe, because we make this issue more public than they want it to be, we can stop them. So feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you agree that this is happening, then please share this with others, as the more that become aware of this, the greater our chances are to stop it. Also, would you consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel, as that would be a great help to me in growing the channel. Hey, as always, I would just like to say God bless you, and thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Until next time.